Welcome to the show, everyone. It's the Crypto Lark. Today, I'm really honored to have with me Lory from ConsenSys. Welcome.
Hello.
Now, for anybody who doesn't know what ConsenSys is, can you give us the short version? What are you guys trying to do?
Sure. So ConsenSys is a global blockchain innovation studio. That's probably the one sentence. What we do is we're trying to, I guess, spread the word as to what blockchain technology is, and more specifically, what the Ethereum blockchain platform is and what it can do for businesses, for individuals, for governments.
Awesome. What you guys do is so important, and I feel like a lot of people don't even know about ConsenSys and what you are doing, and because it's not, you're an incubation lab essentially. Like I said, you're a studio, so you're not an ICO, you're not a tradable token necessarily. You're an organization behind that, actually pushing all this stuff forward, helping incubate ICOs, helping incubate projects that are actually going to be crypto projects based on the Ethereum blockchain. Can you tell me about the scale of the organization? How many people, how many offices, how many projects?
Sure. So we have, this time last year, this is a good stat. This time last year, the company was about 100 people. We're now approaching 900 people 12 months on. So much like the world of blockchain technology, it's an exponential kind of growth and growth curve that we're on. We're in over 30 countries at the moment and expanding into more and more cities really all the time. So last week, obviously, we had our Dublin launch event here in Ireland. So we had 300 people show up to that event. It was a great party. So at least I guess the Irish are good for something. So that's kind of a bit about the kind of numbers and stuff like that. In terms of who we are and what we do, we kind of do 5 things. So number one, we work, we have a part of the business is called solutions. And solutions is basically working with corporates, working with governments to help them understand the technology, to help them unlock the power that the Ethereum blockchain platform can have for them and their businesses. So some of the clients we're working with in that space, we're the strategic blockchain advisors to the EU or the European Union or European Commission, which is a big deal for us. As a startup, to win a big project like that is really significant, to work with 27 different countries.
That's a big deal for anybody. That's awesome. For
sure. So that's one. We've done work with the World Wildlife Fund, and we've worked with JP Morgan, we've worked with Santander, we've worked with GlaxoSmithKline. So we've worked with a range of different companies in a range of different sectors to help them understand the technology, create new products, create new solutions. So that's the kind of the solution side. Another part of the business is called labs. And labs is that idea that you were talking about a second ago, whereby we help identify new projects or new ideas, which we call internally as spokes. And basically we identify these projects and then there's funding that goes towards them to create new products, new businesses, new solutions. So this is the kind of incubator part of the business, which may ultimately result in ICOs or what we call token launches. So we have 50 of these projects in flight at the moment. So the approach is that, you know, I think corporates sometimes think that if they have one innovation project on the go, that will result in a 10x return. That's not the way innovation works. 90% of startups fail. So therefore, what you need to have are lots of projects on the go at any one moment. And therefore, if you have 50, there's a higher probability that one or more will come off. But if you have one project and you're expecting it to be a success, I would bet against that. What else do we have? We have the part of the business called Capital. So we have a venture capital fund of 50 million that we invest in businesses directly. We also have Ethereum, which is that's our kind of community or meetups section. And then we also have Academy, which is basically our training arm. So we're going to be training 2,000 people over the course of this year on Solidity, on Ethereum. Yeah.
Now with the Academy part, is that at the office in Ireland, or is that going to be an outreach program? Are you going to be going to Kabul and Bangkok and all these different places as well?
It's a global, and it's based on demand where we see. So we ran a successful program last year in Dubai, and we're looking to have one in Dublin, but that's because I'm kind of I'm jumping up and down because I want these guys and that team to come over here. It's being run in the US, so really wherever there's demand, and it's about lining up schedules. That's where they'll go. So there's a huge amount of interest and appetite for training sessions. So we need to spend more time. We need to spend more time basically finding more people so we can deliver more training sessions.
Nice. And about is it called Ethereal?
Ethereal, yeah, exactly.
Ethereal. So about Ethereal, I read somewhere the other day somebody was describing it as something like the Burning Man of of blockchain conferences, so to speak. Now, you just had one event recently in New York City around the same time that ConsenSys with a U, not with a Y, was happening. And so that was a very well-received event. But that happens, what, about every 6 months or so? Or is that just a once-a-year event?
That was, as far as I know, it's a once-a-year event, as far as I know. I was actually at that, and I haven't been to Burning Man, but I could see how there were probably elements of it. There was a very cool Zen zone outside the area where people basically got an opportunity to put a blanket over their heads and listen to what sounded like a didgeridoo. So super chilled kind of vibe to it, and it was a fun place to be, to learn about the technology in a very relaxed way. There was no massive kind of no massive pitches or promos. The first day I went there, actually, I got off a flight and I was wearing a blazer. I felt very out of place. So yeah, very relaxed place and a great place just to kind of meet and learn.
Nice. Sounds like fun. I'll have to make sure to go next year.
Hopefully you're very well.
I want to ask about Ireland, because I covered this in my news bit a couple weeks ago, or about a week or so ago, and you've set up a new office in Ireland. Why? What is the attraction of moving to Ireland? What kind of support is being offered by the government? What kind of partnerships do you have in Ireland that make it a good place to go?
So there's a whole bunch of stuff here. I guess there was already a blockchain ecosystem in Ireland. So with the likes of MasterCard, Fidelity, BNP Paribas, to name but a few, all working in the blockchain space. There were already a range of meetups there. So ConsenSys saw this as, you know what, there's already blockchain activity. And what ConsenSys does well is it adds to that existing ecosystem and a lot of times dials it up. So I think that was probably an initial point of, I guess, excitement for ConsenSys. From a government perspective, this is something that I've been working on personally with a semi-governmental entity called the Irish Development Agency or Authority, the IDA, and basically was our mission 3-4 years ago was, how do we make Ireland a blockchain powerhouse? How do we basically, in the same way, if I said cybersecurity, a lot of people would think of Israel as a kind of real center of excellence. How do we set the goal that Ireland becomes synonymous with blockchain technology to create jobs in Ireland? And that was kind of the start of the discussion. So this has been going on for many years. We have a group called the Irish Blockchain Expert Group. So there's about 50 different companies, all different size and shapes, that make up that group. And basically what we've done is we're working with the Department of Finance here in Ireland. We're working with Enterprise Ireland, which is the kind of focused on, I guess, Irish-based companies. We're also working with one of the top legal firms, Arthur Cox, and kind of many other institutions to help develop a strategy to make Ireland I suppose, a friendly place for blockchain activity. We're also working with the universities to develop, I guess, short-term programs. So they may be over the course of a week, medium-term programs over the course of 8 weeks, and then right the way through to PhDs to really focus on the technology. I think the way we discussed it is, you know, if this is half as big as what people say it is, or half as big as the internet, to which people say this is the next internet, well then, as an island and a country, we should be taking this really seriously. Another big part of it is also due to the fact that a significant amount of EMEA headquarters for the likes of Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, Dropbox, Airbnb, Twitter, HubSpot, the list goes on, are based in Ireland. So there's over, what, 25, 30,000 people working in the tech sector here. So there's a strong tech backbone. and all these people are interested in blockchain technology. So that was another reason. There's kind of a buzz around the city.
Absolutely. Well, there's so many companies there, and of course, one thing that I think is also attractive to a lot of companies is the tax regime in Ireland.
It is, and that is a factor. And I think at the start, if we go back kind of 10 and 15 years ago, I think, why Google came to Ireland when there was probably one or two people here, that was the start of it. But then they realized, and I'm probably the anomaly here, that there were some smart people here, and that they were, good, well-educated, good technical talent. So with Google, I guess 2 became 4, became 8, became 100. I actually live on the street that Google is on here. Google employs 8,000 people. They've just bought a massive development that they're taking over, which is part residential and part office space. They want to pedestrianize the road and create a campus. Facebook is moving into another area which they're looking to create a campus on. So I think that may have been a reason at the start, but now there is a wealth of talent here and an ecosystem to which is greater than the sum of the parts, I would argue. So that is, it's also funny from being born and raised in Dublin, go back 10 and 15 years, you're walking around and I don't know if Ireland was incredibly multicultural, but because of all these companies coming in, you're walking down certainly part of the city that I'm in at the moment, you're regularly not hearing English spoken. You're hearing French and Spanish and Italian and German. And it's very cool. And it's making Ireland a multicultural country and a more cosmopolitan country. And we're growing up, which is, I know it's cool to be part of that.
Absolutely. It sounds cool to be part of it. It's bringing this whole new level of invigoration to the country, thanks to, of course, technology and the interest in technology and the bringing together of minds in one place. It's really, I guess, surprising to hear about how big the Google office is there. And of course, there's ConsenSys right in the middle of all this.
For sure. So, and our new office, we've signed a 10-year lease, and it's 4 minutes away from that Google street. And I think it's 8 minutes from Facebook. So we are absolutely in the heart of it. And
I think it's important to point out too that because you're all in the same town together, you really can't disregard how important it is when you go out to, a post-work beer and like, oh, hey, you work at Google? Oh, cool. What do you do? And just making those connections, because it doesn't happen when there's no one in town that works in that industry,
No, for sure. And you know what? Dublin's a great city. It's a small city. It's a very walkable city. So whether you like it or not, you bump into people. And it is. Look, there's a pub that a lot of the Google people hang out in. So if you do want to go meet those people, it's pretty easy to do. And vice versa for any of the kind of different institutions and companies that are around the city.
I want to expand a bit on the idea of blockchain for social impact. I was really lucky to get a chance to talk to Vanessa when I went to Token 2049 in Hong Kong. She kind of laid out some of the ideas of it, but I want to get the perspective from you as well. Where do you see the key areas of blockchain to really have this killer social impact to do good for society, I suppose?
Sure, and I'm definitely still learning about this, so please forgive my ignorance. I think Vanessa is a very impressive lady and tells an infinitely better story than I do, but I think there are a range of different areas. One is this whole area of identity. So how do we create identity for people in perhaps challenged parts of the world due to conflict and war? So where people, as they move from one country to another or across a border, they were citizens of one country, but then as they move into another zone, perhaps they literally they have no identity. So how can we help create identities for these individuals, which then give them access to benefits or rights so that they can actually claim food or literally exist as individuals and humans and connection to their families. So we're absolutely exploring the technology. So there's a specific spoke that we mentioned earlier called Uport, which is creating self-sovereign identity. So that's kind of one specific application that we're looking at. There's also conversations that we're having with a contact of mine in New York. The UN are very interested in around, I suppose, water and rights to water. So that kind of goes along the same lines. Ultimately, the question starts with how can we help? And then we figure out what role the technology plays.
Nice. And when you start to look around some of the different numbers, I'm frequently shocked by some of the numbers that I see, because it makes you realize the intense need for technological solutions to some of these things. Everyone always likes to talk about the unbanked, but the unbanked are just the tip of the iceberg of the problem. We have something like 70% of the people in the world can't even prove they own the property that they've lived on for their entire lives, and they don't have IDs, they don't have access to financial tools, and the list goes on and on and on. And so when you start to realize technology can be the answer for these things, it gets very exciting to realize the impact that all this can have. I want to ask about what's maybe your favorite project. You guys are incubating about 50 projects at the moment. What would be your favorite? If you know.
Yeah, it's like choosing a favorite child.
We love all the projects. You're all loved equally. We're going to talk about one of you now.
Oh, and actually, you know what? And Joe Lubin was here last week in Dublin for our launch event, and I asked him the same question, right? So he said it was kind of the same thing. I love all of them equally. So for me, the more I learn about ConsenSys and all the different projects, I think it probably changes one month, maybe after another, when I learn about more and more of what these are. I think at the moment, we were lucky to have a spoke called Meridio here in Dublin last week. And what Meridio do and what they're interested in is creating fractional ownership of properties. So they've been in the New York Times, they've been on CNN. So basically it's about tokenizing properties. So if there's a house or a building in New York in Manhattan, guess what? It's really expensive. But how do you or how do we get access to buying or having ownership of part of that building? So if we create, let's say, tokens, well, then it becomes more accessible for you and I to have some form of ownership and the potential upside if it increases in value. So it breaks up the property into 10,000 tokens or 1,000,000 tokens, whatever it is, per the agreement of the investors and group. And then you and I can have access to that. That for me is really interesting. So we did a mini roadshow with that spoke Meridio here in Dublin last week, and we met a range of different kind of property companies, the government, to explain, you know what, this is perhaps the beginning of how property will be owned in the future, how it will be traded in the future, how it will be maintained in the future. And you know what, when my mom asks me, Lory, what do you do for a living again? I try and give examples of the technology where I think, or hopefully I can explain, but hopefully she can understand. And I think that property one is an interesting and perhaps easier one to understand for a lot of people.
I think the property use case is going to be really big in the future, not just for, of course, handling the settlements of it and registering the actual deeds and all these different things, but actually tokenizing investments. It's already starting to happen, and we see a few projects kind of working on it, but we haven't seen any gain a really big traction yet. And I feel like we're at the start of this, I guess, exciting ride where we're just starting to go up the hill and like, wow, this is really exciting, but we're still building up those pieces. And in a couple of years, when we see all this stuff really start to gain adoption level and gain traction, it's going to be a curious world to live in, without a doubt.
Oh, for sure. And this is, despite, sometimes I think, wow, we've come a long way. And then the next day I'm thinking, wow, we have a long way to go. And it's just based on different applications of the technology, based on different sectors and industries. Some are more regulated than others, which means it's going to take longer than people anticipate. And we need to be careful and follow the rules. Whilst in other sectors, industries, perhaps where there is less regulation, maybe they're the areas where the technology is going to flourish first. And that's part of the, I guess, the reason it's so exciting. Part of it is just, I do think this year will be significant when we start to see real applications of the technology go into production and on a big scale, and then more so next year. So I do think this is a very important year for the technology to mature also at a kind of institutional and corporate level, which then gives confidence to other corporates to adopt it. So I do think it's an important year in that regard.
Absolutely. We'll have those organizations that are more of the trailblazers on an institutional level, and the other ones that are a little more conservative will say, well, the guys over at whatever company did it, so maybe we can jump in too. But I think you bring up a really good point, and I want to follow up with Ethereum and scaling. I know Vitalik is over there working very hard with the whole team of Ethereum developers, but the reality is right now we got 15 transactions per second on Ethereum. CryptoKitties killed it, and anytime we have an ICO that's popular, the whole network goes down for a half hour or so, as an example. So what can be done to, what are your thoughts? Is ConsenSys worried about the scaling issues of Ethereum?
You know what? It's funny. I was talking to one of our spokes is called Pegasus, and it's specifically looking at how do we help develop Ethereum to scale better and faster. And I was having a chat with him a couple of weeks ago. He works remotely and is based in Tenerife, the lucky guy, islands off North Africa. But basically, he was saying, you know what, CryptoKitties was a really important milestone and an event for Ethereum because it just showed what the challenge is. Sometimes you have to have an event which triggers an action or sometimes a reaction. So one of the projects that is endless within ConsenSys is called, what's the name again? Sorry, it's called Pegasus. And it's all about how we help the ability of Ethereum to scale. So there's a team of people looking at this right now and are working hard every single day. And this is going to go on for months and years to come till we come up with a better solution. So I think you're on the money. The interesting thing when you talk about spokes and projects, whether it be with corporates or whether it be with governments, the conversation has less of late, certainly maybe even the 6 or even maybe 12 months, has less been about scale, actually. People aren't getting worried about scale anymore. That was the initial, oh, I heard it doesn't scale. Those questions aren't really being asked anymore because we're largely answering those questions. Maybe you don't need to put every transaction on the Ethereum blockchain. You can do stuff off chain, or you can post or anchor periodically. The questions now are more about, look, from a legal perspective, from a regulatory perspective, from a jurisdictional perspective. And you know what? They are harder questions, I would argue, to answer, number one. And number two, it shows that the thought process around the technology is changing and maturing, because they're real world questions before stuff goes into production. So it's actually, for me, that's a good story. They're hard questions and we need to answer them. So the important thing is we're asking, as opposed to perhaps where we were before, which was, let's focus all on scaling and not worry about any of the practical, perhaps less sexy stuff.
Well, that practical stuff is incredibly important, because when it comes to things like jurisdiction and on and on and on, that's what really matters in the long run. Because you're right, the scaling solutions are varied and many, and they're being moved forward. We have plasma and sharding and multiple different side chains being developed for Ethereum, and that's just the start of it. So they're definitely working on that, and there's this whole ecosystem developing around Ethereum. Pegasus is one of the many, but we also have the Raiden and I think Liquidity Network and all these different projects, everyone trying to make Ethereum work better. And so it's really encouraging actually to see how much focus is on the Ethereum blockchain and how much belief is in the Ethereum blockchain.
For sure, and it's humbling when I meet with these people and they're explaining what they do. It is the only word I have. Is humbling. Incredibly smart people, incredibly driven people, and I'd say I drive them mad because I'm going, hold on a second, you have to explain that to me again, and bring me back to page one so I understand exactly what they're doing. But the whole thing about Ethereum and what drew me to it is that there is, I think, a statistic that's been coming out is that there's 40 times the amount of developers that are part of the Ethereum community and network than any other platform. So if you're choosing what platform to look at, you should be looking at which has the largest, which is the biggest community, and which has the kind of smartest people working on it. And look, I'm biased, but I certainly think Ethereum is in a good place in that regard.
Well, there's a lot of competition coming too, and the competitors are offering interesting perspectives too, and they're going to have their own communities, but I don't think that in any way diminishes what you guys are doing and the cool stuff that ConsenSys is incubating and trying to push forward, because all these things matter. And welcome to the other blockchains too. They can come join the party. The more the merrier. You know, Ethereum can't solve all the world's problems, so let's put them all on and, you know, actually move forward together, because that's what blockchain's all about, building big communities and of course delivering better results globally for society.
No, absolutely. And you know what? It's other blockchains that are coming out, they're asking questions, and they're asking questions of us. And once again, if we don't know what those questions are, we'll never answer them. So that challenges us, which is a good thing. And you're spot on. This is a community-driven technology and technologies. So we're all about it.
Awesome. Lory, this has been a really interesting chat. So thank you so much for taking time to sit down with us and talk a little bit about what ConsenSys is doing.
My pleasure. Cheers. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for watching the video. Let me know what you think about ConsenSys and their work down in the comment section. Join the conversation over on Twitter. Thumbs up the video. Long live the blockchain. And peace out till next time.